I've actually kind of been seeing these like Knickerbocker Plufors coming into kind of like underground fashion spaces. I love them. I think they're so cute. I'd love to get my hands on a pair of Plufors.
They look comfy too.
I know, right? And they make your calves look like wide, so it's like, you know, you're kind of like muscular and like, I don't know. Yeah.
In my little shorts.
Yeah. My weird little shorts.
Gender affirming blue fours.
Yes, bring back blue fours. The trans community would love blue fours. I know.
Oh, 100%.
Hi, and welcome back to the Bias Cut podcast. What's happening in pop culture today? Y'all should give me a rundown. We can make it like a segment of like
a segment.
You guys
catch
inform
Emma
me what's happening. Catch Emma up.
Okay, let me open Twitter.
Well, it has been Paris Fashion Week. Just first up, that's what's happened the past week. Mm-hmm. And there were a few shows that I was like, oh, okay. I think I will do a video on my like favorite collections of this season. Chanel just had their show yesterday. Mm-hmm. I didn't like it. It was actually very 30s inspired. So linking to this episode.
Yeah.
They're doing the whole like trying to modernize the 30s, and I just they're getting the silhouettes wrong, and it's on purpose because they're trying to like, you know, make it like appealing today, but by messing with that proportion it just looks weird, like it doesn't look right. So I'm not a fan. I do like Matthew Blazy though. It's just I'm not a fan of this collection. Okay, I don't want to be known as the hater, because I'm not.
We don't just hate things, we do love things.
I swear. I also have been watching 1,000 Blows, which I've talked about a couple times now.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun to do maybe not just about that show, but about like that era in general. And like, because it's kind of late Victorian, I think, maybe mid Victorian, I don't know. But I want to get into when they discovered aniline dyes and went freaking crazy with the colors, because I just think that's so funny. Like suddenly everyone's a highlighter. And I love that. It's hideous. Like it's so bad.
Yeah.
But they were having so much fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like the fun of it, is like sometimes it can be so ugly that it becomes kind of fun and like kind of beautiful.
Well, you have to give everyone a Wemby update, Maggie. Tell the people what happened to Wemby, because I do think
so my cat got out on Saturday, and we don't actually, it's not really that interesting of a story. We were supposed to record on Saturday, but we couldn't because my cat got out. And I frantically spent all day looking for him. It was really scary. So I fed him in the morning, and then he just disappeared. And we were like, where'd he go? I don't know. And everyone, I was posting on
so scary.
Yeah. I was posting on Nextdoor, like, look, and all the neighborhood ladies were so kind and were like commenting back that they'll look for him and like giving tips on how to find him. And they're like, are you sure he's not hiding somewhere? Like that happened to us. Like he was hiding. And like, yeah, it's possible, but he had never hid before. And I was doing all the things that I could do to like get him to come out. Like I was opening every window. Like you can't keep this kid away from an open windowsill. And like he will sit on it with a screen, of course, so he can't get out. But he was just not coming. So I was like, okay, he's like not in the house. And it got dark. Well, what was so scary is by like 4:00 is when he eats, and he's always like itching for it. You know, he's like annoying you because he's hungry, and nothing. And I was like, he's hungry somewhere. It was so scary. And
that's so scary.
And then it got dark, and I was like, well, I'm going to go out and look for him again. And what we did was we opened the garage door, like just cracked it. So we were like, okay, if we can't find him and we go to bed, if he wanders way home, like he can come inside. And I was like walking up and down the block. I was going in circles around the whole house yelling for him. And I was about to give up, and I come back I'm coming back to the back side of the house, and the garage door is slightly open, and I shine my flashlight and I see his little eyes poking right out, and he was there. And I ran to get him, and he like wouldn't even come to me. He was like shaking. He was like in the corner, and I like had to like lure him over to me. And the second I picked him up, like, yeah, he's shaking and he's like freaking out. He's like, he was so scared. And he was so hungry, and yeah, he hadn't eaten all day after breakfast, and so we brought him in and we fed him, and now he's totally fine, and you'd think it never happened. He's back to his regular self. Yeah,
on his adventures.
That was really scary because he's an indoor cat and he's never been outside. He's been outside but never by himself, and I don't know, maybe he was stuck in the garage the whole time and we had no idea. I don't think he was, because I looked pretty thoroughly there a few times and I couldn't find him. But he made his way back.
He did.
We're good. Yeah.
You know we're home at.
You know we're home at.
And then I posted an update on Nextdoor, and all the ladies were like, "I'm so glad your beautiful boy made his way home." And I was like, "Oh, I love Nextdoor. I love our community."
Yes. Yes.
That's so cute.
That's so sweet. Today, we will be talking about skinny versus baggy trousers. As the internet reminisces about the 2016 aesthetic, I think back on what we were all wearing at the time. The chokehold skinny jeans had on society was beginning to ever so slightly crumble, ushering in a new wave of silhouettes like the mom jean or distressed jeans with holes bigger than your thighs. Although it would take some time before skinny jeans were truly banished from people's closets, since 2016 the tides have been changing and the silhouettes are loosening. So what brought us to this moment in trouser history? In an endless cycle between skinny and baggy trouser silhouettes, we're going to ask the question, what does trouser width tell us about society? And will skinny jeans make a comeback, forcing us to dust off the Abercrombie and Hollister jeans from the back of our closets like some old doll we never wanted in the first place? Now, before I get ahead of myself, this episode is part 1 in the series that will take a look at trouser trends in North America, the UK, and Europe. This first part will be the 1910s to 40s, looking at bifurcated skirts and World War II era zoot suits. Part 2 will be the 50s to 90s, where trousers went from high-waisted bell-bottoms to low-rise flares. And part 3 will be the 2000s to present, looking at the dark age of skinny jeans and the inevitable post-pandemic baggy pant and athleisure craze. So let's dive into what people are wearing at the turn of the century.
Let's go!
First, let's do a brief rundown on men's trousers, because for women it's much more complicated. Throughout the 1910s, men's fashion largely continued on from the previous decade. Different tailored suits for specific social occasions, and knickerbockers for sportswear. Knickerbockers were essentially puffier trousers that cut off with a band at the knees, though where it cuts off is kind of subject to change. The lounge suit or 3-piece suit, which included a waistcoat, came into popularity as a casual alternative to more formal suits. Trouser legs remained more tailored and straight-fitted, but crept up to ankle length and often had cuffs turned up at the bottom. Throughout World War I, men tended to be seen in their military garb throughout North America, the UK, and Europe, though as far as trousers go, the fit was largely the same as what was worn before the war. So pretty much the 1910s was just very kind of fitted trousers, and kind of heavily inspired too by what the military garb was.
First question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the knickerbockers because I didn't realize that was really a thing. So would this have been 1910s?
Yeah, 1910s.
So do we think that's the last time we have this kind of silhouette for trousers for men? No. Ooh.
Yeah,
so they're
gonna come back. Yeah. God. They kind of like stay for a pretty long time until probably the end of the 20s into the 30s. Okay. But also you'll see women kind of start to adopt them as well. Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, I would never imagine a guy wearing that silhouette right now.
Right?
Like, it's become like so far removed from our, like, current fashion lexicon. Yeah. Like, you just wouldn't.
Yeah, I kind of have a theory that part of it had to do with, like, World War II. Because after World War II and kind of, like, leading up to it, there's this, like, big turn into, like, pretty severe conservatism, like, throughout the Western world. And so, like, men wanted to look very masculine. And I think because that style of trouser, number one, was kind of, like, women were starting to wear them minorly. And then also, it was kind of just for sportswear. Like, some men wore them kind of out and about, but it was largely for, like, golfing or I think maybe even tennis. And I think new styles of sportswear were starting to emerge. And so I think it kind of just, like, fell out of favor. Because that style of trouser for men was in kind of men's wardrobes for, like, decades.
For centuries.
Centuries,
that's
like,
exactly. 17th century, like, breeches. Yeah,
exactly. And so, I mean, that, you know, breeches were being worn for, like, formal attire, and then that slowly became sportswear, and then I think it just kind of fell out.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it has to do with, like, the whole masculinity thing, because the Second World War really kind of, like, men wanted to be super buff and you know, very distinct from women's wear.
Right.
Okay, so the 1920s saw some fun changes to men's sportswear, similar to women's, as we will see. Oxford bags and plus fours rose in popularity. Oxford bags were a style of full-length trousers created by undergraduates at Oxford who were inspired by the school's crew team, who wore wide-leg trousers over their uniforms. So the style was extreme in that the legs of the trousers were sometimes 44 inches per leg at the bottom, though often they were 22 inches. So, like, we're talking big pants, like, kind of almost cartoonish. Plus fours developed out of ordinary knickerbockers. So they were short-legged trousers that gather around the knee, and, like Oxford bags, were a bit baggier version of their precursor. So they had 4 extra inches of material extending beyond the knee, hence the name, and they were popular golf attire, but quickly became popular day wear. So they're kind of just like the baggier version of
these are kind of cute.
The knickerbockers.
I like these.
They are cute. And we'll see they're kind of what will emerge into, like, women's wardrobes because they're baggier.
Okay. But, like, can I just say, like, this with a little kitten heel? Cute.
No, literally.
Yeah, like a little,
and you know
like
what?
A little baby tee and a...
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I've actually kind of been seeing these, like, knickerbocker plus fours coming into kind of, like, underground fashion spaces. I love them. I think they're so cute. I'd love to get my hands on a pair of plus fours.
They look comfy too.
I know, right? And they make your calves look, like, wide, so it's like you're kind of, like, muscular and, like, I don't know.
Woo.
Yeah.
In my little shorts.
Yes. In my weird little shorts.
Gender affirming plus fours.
Yes, bring back plus fours. The trans community would love plus fours. I know.
Oh, 100%.
Jump scare. This is editing Emily. I realized as I'm editing this that I never included what men in the 1920s are wearing outside of activewear. I don't know where I slipped up here, but it's okay. Essentially what you have is a very similar style to trousers as you see in the 1910s. There isn't that much kind of, like, momentum happening. There's like maybe a slight more kind of, like, looseness in trousers, but overall you really just have essentially the same silhouette. We're really just seeing the kind of like bagginess or the relaxation, I guess, in kind of these like underground trousers like Oxford bags and activewear like the Plu 4. But by and large, on the day-to-day, you tend to just have that same kind of like slightly more tapered silhouette for trousers, although it definitely kind of expands a little bit. So by the 1930s, the trend of more casual wear continued. Though formal wear remained for the evening, special occasions, and work, knitted sweaters and soft-collared t-shirts became popular in every other context. While no longer as wide as the previous decades' Oxford bags and Plu 4s, trouser legs continued to be wide at the bottom and worn creased in the front and cuffed. Influenced from the past World War and the impending Second War meant that shoulders became increasingly padded and the sleeves were tapered. This was all meant to make men appear more masculine and muscly. Outside of the upper classes, the effects of the Great Depression continued to be felt. Worn boots, large overcoats, flat caps, and work-style trousers continued to be worn due to a lack of access to new clothing. All of this intensified by the 40s due to the start of World War II. Rationing affected all ages and genders, meaning less fabric could be used for new clothing. Though with so many men going to war or doing their part at home, it was more unusual to see men out of uniform than it was to see them in it. The utility suit, that like weird little model man, that's the utility suit. He's so scary.
Like Spock.
No, literally, he's so scary. I had to include him because there's something going on behind his eyes.
I wish I could do it with you, but I can't. I'm sorry.
So that was kind of the utility suit. It was basically just like a standardized suit that was created for the war effort to accommodate ration laws. So it was single-breasted, or the jackets were single-breasted, the lapel sizes were restricted, less material was to be used in the tailoring of trousers, and the turn-ups at the cuffs of the trousers were completely removed.
Another question.
Yeah.
Would this have been off the rack? So like we're getting into mass manufacturing, we're getting into buying pre-made, ready to wear.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I think some people would get it kind of like tailored to fit them.
Right.
But yeah, it was essentially more like mass produced because it was, I think, kind of in line with like uniform wear. So it was kind of considered to be uniform wear in some ways. Okay. What we will get into towards the end of the episode are zoot suits. So we're just going to put a pin in that. But zoot suits are happening in the 40s. That kind of felt fast and certainly doesn't accommodate for alternative dresses kind of happening. But generally what we see with men's trousers is a slow progression to wider silhouettes that is abruptly cut off by the 40s because of the war. So pants are widening. Literally. So yeah, basically just like widening, and then the war no more fun with fashion.
No more fabric for you.
Literally, no more fabric for you. So now shifting to women's wear, which it's going to be a lot more fun. I start in the 1910s for this entire series because this is really the first time that we're seeing true momentum behind women wearing something that resembles a pant in the West. Okay. Prior to this, there had been smaller efforts to integrate trousers into women's wear. Towards the end of the Victorian era, which spans from what I'll be talking about, we're just 1850 to 1890, but that's not the full Victorian era. The dress reform movement advocated for women's rights to wear trousers, spreading throughout North America, the UK, and Europe. A notable figure and trendsetter in this movement was Amelia Jenks Bloomer, an American editor who controversially adopted a version of women's trousers worn by women in Swana and Central Asia. I'd like to note here that though trousers were risky for women to wear in Western countries, this wasn't really the case for the rest of the world. So many women in different countries have been wearing versions of trousers for centuries, and their virtue wasn't necessarily tied to these garments in the same way it was in the West. So although controversial for her to wear, Amelia's trousers were soon dubbed the bloomer after her last name, and a small group of women adopted the trend. However, the vast majority of Victorian society didn't. Aside from the bloomer, there were a few other trouser trends that, although I love, similarly didn't gain traction. There were trousers that sort of mimicked breeches, but also looked like early plou-fours. They called these the bicycle suits.
These are fun. I like these.
Yeah, I love the bicycle suits.
With the big sleeves as well.
I know. You look cute on a bike.
And that is the dream.
That's the dream.
That's the dream. But also women didn't necessarily always wear them to ride bifurcated.
Right.
They kind of just wore them because they're cute. We also see bifurcated skirts. Bifurcated skirts.
Please keep that in.
I will. Bifurcated skirts. Which come out of the bicycle suit trend. So, like the name suggests, the bifurcated skirt was quite literally a skirt that was turned into something resembling long shorts or capris. Some designs covered the separation in the front of the garment with a flap and buttons, making it kind of appear as a skirt, hence the name bifurcated skirt.
Kind of the OG squirt, right?
Yeah, literally, kind of like an early skirt or squirt, yeah. Although none of these garments truly stuck or became mainstream, they are evidence of women wanting more freedom. As an aside, there was also tons of gender-bending dressing happening at this time, especially in North America. What I mean by this is women, or people who were socialized as women, dressing as men and living largely undetected. A few instances of this are the gender-fluid secret soldiers of the American Civil War, as well as people who dressed as men to work jobs and support themselves independently. You see this a lot in the Western US, mainly because it was kind of like considered to be new land, even though it wasn't new land, but it was kind of like, you know, new societies are developing, and so people could kind of like escape their past and like become whoever they wanted in the West. And also there were like tons of jobs available too. So this is definitely an entirely different context, but are still cases of women wearing pants, or quote unquote women wearing pants. By the turn of the century, the West was ripe for serious change to women's wear. A new century meant new everything, and for years prior, women had been slowly gaining new freedoms. Physical activity and sports became a new social space, requiring new types of dress to match the activity. I think one of the reasons trousers ultimately became socially acceptable in these contexts is, one, there were rules. You could only wear the garment in these social scenarios, so it was controlled and confined. And two, they were wide legs, so they kind of looked like skirts. This all meant that women were still being controlled. Also to note, not only were there social rules determining where and when trousers were allowed to be worn, there were also physical laws in North America, the UK, and Europe. This largely affected people who existed outside of the gender binary as a way to kind of like contain the problem. But we will see in the 1930s this affecting affluent women as well. By the 1920s, women started wearing trousers outside of activity, ushering in a new wave of moral panic. This coincided with a shift in mainstream women's wear, the garçon or tomboy style. We could do a whole episode about this trend, but what it boiled down to was women's clothing, that is dresses and skirts, took on an androgynous, streamlined, boyish aesthetic. Dresses lost the waist, shortened to sometimes above the knee, super scandalous. And the bob hairstyle became the new craze. People at the time quite literally thought this made women look like men. There was moral panic, and people said they legitimately couldn't tell apart a woman from a man walking down the street.
Okay, so now I will say it's interesting that this style has become... So this is what I was talking about when I was saying the recent Chanel show. Miu Miu as well. they've both gone back to this garçon look with the drop waist and the very like no shaping, very straight linear silhouettes. And it's funny that you say the moral panic, because we're very much, I would say, living in a very similar cultural kind of climate.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do I think that the designers did this because as a response to that? No, I don't think so. But I think it's a funny coincidence, or maybe a telling coincidence.
Yeah,
100%.
Chanel really, if people didn't know, Chanel like piloted this look, like this silhouette. It was Chanel's 20s whole thing, and so I do think there also is some sort of like playing into nostalgia a little bit with that, you know, of like going back to the roots. It might be though.
I think
that is interesting.
There are so many parallels to like, I mean, as I was doing my dissertation research, I felt so many parallels of like the 1920s to 30s, because by the 30s, and I'll get into that in a second, the conservatism took on in such an extreme way because of the, you know, impending war. And so all of these like liberties that people felt in the 20s was like very quickly like policed in a very extreme way. And designers really took on like very feminine silhouettes and then very masculine silhouettes for men. And so but in the 20s you see this, like, people are like kind of going crazy, hanging out, looking like a man, even though they're literally wearing dresses, but like kind of taking on this like androgynous look. And I mean, you see a lot of queer people and like nightlife people really doing like a lot of gender bending fashion. And so I think you can feel a lot of those parallels as we're in like the 2020s and we're nearing the end of the 2020s, or we're in the middle, but we're coming close to the end of like, there's, I mean, since the beginning of the 2020s, there's been this like growing conservatism. So I don't think it's like perfectly a parallel, but you can see kind of like a lot of, you can like compare and contrast in a really big way. I think that, that was a really good point.
Yeah. And I think too, like, that just really makes sense hearing that when we feel safe and secure, we feel more comfortable trying new things, expanding our tastes, changing things up. But when things are very uncertain, like you're talking about rise of conservatism, impending war, like those are all things happening. It makes sense that people would kind of shelter back in and like just stick with what you know, stick what feels safe and comfortable, because you kind of just you're grasping at straws at that point.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, because honestly, the like dynamics of fashion have changed to the point where trickle down isn't really a thing. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not really as much. So I would be interested to see how much of high street fashion actually takes on
100%
from the designers trying these silhouettes, because I honestly can't see like the average girly wearing like a drop waist, completely shapeless dress right now. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I can't imagine that we would see that actually becoming a trend necessarily right now.
I think I totally agree, and I think one of the things that I like want to do with this series is like going through these like major trends that are happening, but then showing like what people are actually wearing. And I think that that's why I like am gonna highlight the Zoot suit in a little bit, because even in the 10s to 40s there really isn't necessarily a trickle down influence of fashion. There's really like street fashion is really starting to develop in kind of a more major way, and I think we'll see that develop in a much bigger way once we like get more into like, you know, once we hit the 90s and exactly. So yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. Back to the 20s. People are scared. Women look like men, and people are frightened in the streets.
The people are scared. Men.
The people are scared. Men.
Men are scared.
But I think what's interesting is that women loved the style, and despite the controversy, it was a massive trend in the mainstream. In addition to this, there were a few very bold and stylish women who began wearing trousers, again wide leg, out and about during the day and in the evening. Though I'd like to stress that this was a very small group of women and people who existed outside of the gender binary. Oftentimes this meant wearing beach attire or beach pajamas and athletic clothing outside of their context. So beach pajamas were super stunning. They're hard to describe because they're kind of all different in their own way. But basically what you had was a tunic length tank top, which was super loose fitted, paired with wide-legged baggy trousers and some sort of mid-length robe.
Feels very 70s to me.
Right? Yeah.
Something about it. Also, I will just say, because I bet you, if this reaches a significant amount of people, there'll be one person be like, that's a salwar kameez. They were doing this in like, girl, yeah, okay, we know it's not. No one's saying that this is like the first time that this style has existed. Like, Muslim women in Asia have been wearing these kind of styles since like the Mughal times. Like, this is not. And it's not necessarily also the West stealing or appropriating. I just think, you know, cultures can develop individually. It doesn't always have to be, you know, someone taking from someone else, or it's not that simple. It's never that simple. And whilst, you know, again, we acknowledge that there are similarities, I am going to assume that likely this developed, as you've been saying, I mean, you've essentially laid out the foundations of this, like, silhouette becoming popular. Don't think it was really related to
I think
like Asian styles.
I think there's potentially a bit of a possibility, just because, I mean, at the time in the 20s, kimonos were really like making a major hit.
I would understand that link better, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. I think there are like a lot of styles in the 20s that are like, I think a lot of the trends that you see in the 20s are inspiration from like international styles, and you can really see that influence kind of all over the place. But then, you know, there is like a mixture of like developing trends from the silhouettes that already existed in the society before. So yeah, I think that was a good point. Yeah,
I just say that because I feel like right now we're living in an age of people are terrified of these kind of, no one knows how to talk about these kind of fusion styles, or like, I mean, it's what my dissertation was about, but it's this form of like creolization, of mixing of cultures that's not inherently exploitative. Like that doesn't, yes, there are going to be power dynamics there, but to immediately dismiss it as, oh, someone is stealing from someone else, or, you know, someone is taking advantage of, you know, the weaker position. I just think that that's really rudimentary, and it's really like, you're also just like taking the joy of sharing culture, and that really like makes me sad. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
Yes, like, you can have critiques, like, I'm not saying that it's a perfect thing, because again, like I said, there's always going to be power dynamics involved, but we can have conversations, people. We can find ways to do this in a way that isn't completely like dismissing the idea of shared culture, shared ideas, shared styles. That's my little rant that I'm just going to insert here just in case. But I will say, yeah, you're right in the the turn of the century was the kind of key time of, if you basically go read Edward Said, Orientalism, that explains a lot of the 20s.
Absolutely. The pajamas tended to be made with silk, linen, or cotton, so generally breathable fabrics. An example of sportswear would be tennis costumes, which sometimes consisted of button-down shirts, straight-legged trousers made from cotton and linen, and a tie. These ensembles were socially accepted as activity-specific clothing, so when women wore them outside of these social sites, they were open to ridicule, social exclusion, and in some extreme cases were fined or arrested. I'd like to plug here the person I wrote my dissertation about, Claude Cahun. Cahun was a French artist living in Paris in the 20s and 30s, who more often than not falls under the lesbian artist canon. My research explored Cahun within the trans context, something I chose to pursue for multiple reasons I'd love to explore in a future episode. However, for now, let's look at pictures of them wearing trousers.
And they look great.
Truly. So Cahun was kind of a freak in Paris, and I say that with love as a fellow freak. A lot of male artists did not mess with their vibe at all and thought they were addicted to drugs because they shaved their head and wore trousers. So there's an iconic self-portrait of Cahun wearing a quote-unquote men's ensemble, boldly wearing trousers and a blazer, bald head in full view. These trousers fall into similar men's styles at the time, so kind of more tailored and fitted, but we're kind of creeping into a little bit of bagginess. There were a select few other people in North America and the UK and other European countries who wore a similar style of dress as Cahun in public. They were also people who likely existed outside of the gender binary and were more likely to be targeted by police for their choice of dress, that is, dressing like a man. Most of these laws stated that women could only legally wear a certain amount of men's garments before it was considered cross-dressing.
Like there was a number?
Yeah, you had to wear at least 3 like women's garments before you.
What counted as a women's garment?
It could be like, you know, your dress, stockings, like head, like a hat, jewelry. Those were women's garments.
I think that just goes to show how like stupid gendered clothing is.
And all of these, and I say this in a little bit, but like all of these like rules around dress were so hard to actually enforce, that more often than not, people were just targeted because they couldn't fly as far under the radar as other people.
Right.
So it's kind of, the laws existed so that they could ultimately fine and arrest people who they did catch. Okay, so by the 1930s, women's wear made a stark shift towards feminine silhouettes due to the impending war and growing conservatism in the West. The bias cut dress, a slight nod to the name of the podcast, is evidence of dress silhouettes that were purposely following the quote-unquote natural curves of a woman's body. These dresses were created by the iconic French fashion designer Madeleine Vionnet, and were made by cutting fabric at a 45-degree angle to the warped and weft threads rather than straight along the grain. This technique creates a fluid, draped, and body-skimming silhouette that naturally hugs the curves. Without derailing too much and getting too deep into theory, showcasing the feminine body before World War II, which wasn't just the bias cut dress, the garçon look completely went away, and there were more, people were starting to define their waist more. It could indicate a desire to establish a woman's place in the world as mothers, wives, generally people who created life, in an effort to contain the quote-unquote liberated woman. The woman of the 1930s was meant to ultimately stay at home with the children and take care of the home. But again, we need to look at trousers and not get too far into the weeds. But that's kind of some of the theories of what's happening at the time.
And can I just say, like, politics aside, this is just such a pretty dress.
Oh, like, it's gorgeous.
Stunning.
So gorgeous.
Unfortunately, they were onto something.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know, the famous atonement dress, that was a bias cut dress.
Yes.
And the reason that people love it so much, and the reason it has the effect that it does, is because it's cut on the bias.
So, like, it was also just like a revolutionary technique too, of
when
she figured out. Yeah.
Also, just like, I'm not putting that also onto Madeline Vianney. Like, she created the dress because she was doing something like cool and beautiful. She wasn't doing this because of growing conservatism.
Just quick theory, sometimes it's more about like why a style becomes popular as opposed to why the style was created. Like, we're not saying
Exactly.
You can't put that onto Madeline Vianney.
No, I mean, a lot of people like consider her to be a lesbian icon. So who's to say who Miss Vianney was? But yeah, so it really has nothing to do with like the designers. I'm sure that there were some designers who like wanted to reel in the liberated woman, but oftentimes it's definitely not that. On the trouser front, this meant a crackdown on dress code violators. In 1938, American teacher Helen Hulick was jailed for 5 days after denying 3 judge requests to show up to court not wearing pants. Total icon.
She said,
"That's awesome." No. You're like, "Actually, I'll just stay here. That's actually fine." Similarly, in 1933, the German-American actress Marlene Dietrich, who probably is one of the most known women from this time who wore pants, was pictured arriving at a train station in Paris wearing trousers. In the picture, Dietrich is captured in a 2-piece suit, button-up shirt, and a tie. The suit is in a similar style to men's suits from the 1930s, so wide-leg trousers, creased at the front and cuffed at the bottom. She was printed in the French press as having violated the ban on women wearing trousers, and the public literally went into a frenzy, with people commenting on her gender-bending ways.
She looks incredible.
She looks so good.
So cool.
It's such an iconic picture.
Like, that's wow.
That's the energy.
Oh yeah, that's not staged for a movie. Like that is
right?
A real photograph.
Like, that's insane. That looks like it could come from like the Peaky Blinders set. Like that.
Yes. That energy is what you're bringing to the podcast today, Sana.
Thank you so much.
You have that Marlene look today.
I wish. Damn, she looks
No,
cool.
She looks so good. And she like totally owned it too. Like, I mean, yeah, love her. Although no warrant was issued for her arrest, there was a French law at the time which prohibited women from wearing trousers. So there was like that three garment law. One Vogue excerpt from the 30s states. That was hard.
It's a tough one. Why is the X and the C next to each other?
Literally. One Vogue comment says from the 30s states. If people accuse you of aping men, make no notice. Our new slacks are irreproachably masculine in their tailoring, but women have made them entirely their own by the colors in which they order them, and the accessories they add. The modern woman should wear slacks practically the whole time, unless she's the guest of an Edwardian relic with reactionary views.
Damn.
So fun. That's crazy.
If you're against this, you're old. We hate you. Like, that's
yeah. You're old and weird. So, although moments like this are super exciting to hear as a researcher, they don't necessarily reflect society at the time. Trousers were still hugely controversial, subject to law, and cause for social exclusion. Oftentimes, women who did wear trousers were able to do so because of the industries they were in and because they were upper class. Even then, it was mainly queer women or trans people who boldly wore trousers as a way of gender identity construction. Okay, so then by the 1940s, World War II was underway, and out of pure necessity, women were encouraged to bring trousers into their everyday wardrobe as they played a vital role in the war effort. As women entered the job force, working in various different military operations or filling the factory positions that were abandoned by drafted men, it was nearly normalized for women to be seen wearing trousers. Although this felt like total liberation for many women throughout North America, the UK, and Europe, there were accounts of women feeling socially humiliated by wearing pants. trousers were still seen as menswear, regardless of if a woman had to wear them for work. That takes us from the 1910s to 40s for both men's and women's trousers. Before we get into the ever so interesting case study, zoot suits, what are your thoughts on trousers?
I've learned so much. I didn't know. I didn't know any of that. I think it's interesting to see how the women's styles developed very separately from the men's kind of trends. As you said, it's more exciting. But damn, those blue fours, those are cute as hell.
They're so cute.
Gonna need one of them.
I know, seriously. All right, let's get into the zoot suit. Editing me again. Just popping in to say before we start off with zoot suits, a bit of a content warning. The zoot suit was a very politicized and criminalized outfit ensemble, and so because of that, there's going to be a lot of discussion of systemic racism, police brutality, and just a lot of really bad stuff that happened to people because of the clothing that they were wearing and because of the color of their skin. Just putting that kind of to just to start off this section. Also to say that I won't be adding any images of zoot suiters being brutalized in the LA Zoot Suit riots, because a lot of that information is really circulated. There are tons of articles, videos, etc. that show those images, and I don't feel like that's super appropriate to show people in that way within this context of our episode. There are obviously tons of articles that I'm going to link to and books that I'm going to link to in the show notes, not as a way for you to go look at those images because, again, they're very distressing. However, there are tons of great researchers. I say that because there are tons of great researchers who have done the Zoot Suit riots justice, and I wanted to mention all of I wanted to mention the context of the Zoot Suit with the Zoot Suit riots, but I don't want to use those images because, again, they're very harmful. So yeah, just a kind of disclaimer before we start off this section of the episode. So what even is a Zoot Suit? The first known record of this iconic suit dates back to 1930s Harlem, New York City, and the jazz singer-songwriter Cab Calloway. Raised in Baltimore, Maryland, Calloway grew up performing in jazz clubs despite his parents' disapproval. In 1929, he officially moved to Harlem, which at the time was fully in the period known as the Harlem Renaissance. This refers to 1920s to 30s Harlem, a predominantly black neighborhood in New York City that experienced a vibrant flowering of new styles of literature, music, and art. This was in large part due to the Great Migration, which was a period of American history where black people from the southern states, formerly enslaved states, and were experiencing the Jim Crow laws that were kind of at their peak at this time. They moved en masse to northern states, seeking more freedoms and access to better paying jobs. Because of this, Harlem really became this community of artistic expression, and is why we had so many iconic musicians like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Bessie Smith, as well as iconic writers like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Claude McKay. Jazz and blues rhythms inspired new poetry styles and paintings. My synopsis doesn't do this period and neighborhood any justice, but in an effort to stay on track, we will leave it there. And I've included a lot of really awesome articles and books in the reading list below that kind of dive more into this period. So due to this rise in music and art in Harlem, the swing era was born, with the Lindy Hop as one of the most notable dances to accompany it. Swing was a style of music that comes from jazz. Some of the most popular producers of this genre of music include Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, and Louis Armstrong. A lot of those people had varying ages, so you might be a bit confused, but the swing era lasted for like multiple decades. So it spanned outside of kind of this like Harlem Renaissance. The Lindy Hop was an expressive form of dance inspired by tap, breakaway, the Charleston that went alongside of swing music. Calloway, having moved to Harlem during the peak of the Renaissance, was an incredibly popular musician at the time and was first seen wearing a zoot suit on stage as early as the 1930s. Key elements of the zoot suit are super oversized trousers that are tailored to sort of balloon around the leg, but taper at the ankle in a cuff, an oversized suit jacket with large lapels and extends well beyond the waist, kind of like almost tunic length, a button-up shirt, tie, and my favorite accessory, a very large pocket watch / chain that is, well, the hat too.
I was ready.
Pocket watch is like so cute.
And then you went pocket watch and
you're like, oh shit. Okay, never mind.
Whoops.
The large pocket watch / chain that's attached to the waist of the trousers and sometimes extends well past the knee. Truly an iconic suit, and is actually known to be the first American suit. Calloway was a big time supporter of this style, and some say he popularized the look throughout Harlem. Just shows kind of like the expressive nature of the music and how the suit kind of like was really a part of it.
It's also so interesting how much that reads as 80s.
Right?
Like that, you could tell me that was from the 80s, and like if I only like glanced at it,
yeah,
it's wild.
And that's the thing, and I don't really get into it all that much at the end, but I kind of talk about it a little bit, that like the zoot suit like took off in such a big way, and we see it, I mean, we've seen references to the zoot suit since its inception in like the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
And the 80s was really the time when like people were really inspired by the zoot suit. And so I think that's why it almost seems like it's a part of the 80s, because it really was.
Yeah. Also, is that the chain, the pocket?
Yes.
Watch? That's crazy.
Right? Isn't that sick?
How did you not fall over that?
Literally. So the true kind of origins of the zoot suit are not solid and kind of largely unknown. One theory is that the zoot suit was inspired by Oxford bags, those weird big pants men wore in the 20s, because they had made their way over to the US from the UK and were really popular in the 20s. Though fun and certainly possible, I think the more plausible theory is that they were created for swing dance specifically. The idea is that by the 30s, men's pants were widening, as we've seen, and to accommodate for the movements of swing, the bottom of the pants were tapered at the ankle so people didn't trip over themselves while dancing. Because swing dance was so fashionable, the outfits worn to clubs would have been the hot new fashion, or were places where someone could wear kind of their most fashionable, well-made outfit. Swing clubs were where you went to be seen. From this, the trend simply skyrocketed beyond nightclubs and into daytime wear. In part, this could have been due to how expensive these suits were. On average, a zoot suit cost $78 in 1930, which would be $1,500 in 2026. So super, super pricey garments. So it's possible they grew in popularity also because they were so expensive, people wanted to get as much use out of the suit as possible. I also think this general theory is more plausible because of the true intense popularity of swing music and the dance genre internationally.
And just to clarify, is this contrasting the whole rationing of fabric?
Yes, and we'll get into that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So swing is really kind of what took off across the world, and zoot suits were kind of the accessory that went with the music. So the two were super interconnected. Swing music and zoot suits took off in France, with people calling themselves zazous. To know, Zazu subculture ultimately became associated with resistance of Nazi occupation during the war.
The Zazus against Nazis.
Yes! I think
Zazu
is like so like I love it.
So camp.
I know. But yeah, we'll kind of get into the zoot suits' relationship to political resistance in a little bit, so keep that in the back of your mind. And then South Africa, it rose in popularity as resistance. Italy, Canada, specifically Montreal, and then the UK, where zoot suiters were called spivs. And a lot of other countries. Yeah.
Zazu is better. France wins.
Is so fun.
There's no flair to that.
Dang it, France wins again. Yeah, so I'd like to share some fun recorded memories of people and their zoot suits, because there was a big effort, I think in like the 70s and 80s, for people to record these like zoot suit wearers, like their relationship to their suits, which is so cool. Yeah. So Theodopolis Matthew Alford recalled when he was in his 80s, anyone who was hip had one. I just loved mine because it was different from the other boys in the neighborhood. The stripes were two hues of blue, which caused a shadow effect on the suit. Similarly, Malcolm X was known to wear the suit and recalled in his autobiography purchasing a sky blue zoot suit on credit. It was so expensive. I just love those little stories. I think that is like...
Theodopolis wanted to be... he didn't want to be like the other girls.
Yes! and his hat, like, I think it shows how much of a memory these specific articles of clothing were, like, the fact that people remember the, color of this suit. And it was, like, such a... I think especially for Malcolm X, it was like a really pivotal point. He bought his first zoot suit when he was 15, and it was like this big moment of purchasing a garment and and feeling like you're a part of this very fashionable movement of people. Just really, really cool. And I love that people remember those things.
Yeah, I think it really just goes to show how much clothing really can be used to express identity, and how important that is, like you said, to remember it decades later, and how you felt in that day. It's so wholesome. It's so
wholesome. Yes. So in the US, the trend spread as far as Los Angeles, but never really took hold in the South because of Jim Crow. Although there were definitely some people who adopted the trend, it just wasn't as big. I say Los Angeles, and you might be thinking to yourself, weren't there zoot suit riots? Yes, Los Angeles is really where we see the riots begin. So to give some context as to why there were riots in the first place, the suit, though a massively popular trend among not only Black Americans, but also Mexican, Japanese, Filipino, Italian, and Eastern European Americans, by the 1940s, it was seen as controversial in mainstream society and quickly became associated with quote-unquote criminal youth activity, heavy on the youth part of it. And I put air quotes around criminal because the people who wore zoot suits were not necessarily committing crimes. They were just being racially profiled by cops and deemed to be gangsters and therefore criminals. So the zoot suit began in the 30s and really carries over into the 40s, where it peaked in popularity. As World War II began, the Western world started rationing not only food but fabric. In 1942, the War Production Board in the US issued Regulation L-85 that placed restrictions on clothing. This limited the length of the suit jacket, the number of pleats, number of pockets and pocket flaps, cuffs on trousers, and the vest would no longer be part of the suit. Zoot suiters rejected this and continued to wear their elaborate outfits, creating an illegal underground tailoring economy. Tailors would use as much as 5 or more yards of fabric in the pants alone. Just to be clear, owning a zoot suit in wartime was not the crime, but it was a crime to manufacture the suit. The War Production Board placed a $10,000 fine on tailors who ignored the restrictions on cloth and material to make them.
10,000?
Yeah. Owning and wearing a zoot suit wasn't necessarily the criminal aspect of it, although we will see it is criminalized. Right. It's just the only thing that they could genuinely put a restriction in law on are the tailors doing it. So it literally was like an underground illegal tailoring economy.
Hilarious.
Super
like, objectively hilarious.
No, literally.
Because what are we doing?
Literally, what are we doing? And that's what I'm saying, like these like laws that we put onto like clothing and dress are so hard to actually enforce and so stupid. Fabric restrictions were difficult to regulate because you could essentially say that your suit was made before wartime ration regulations, so there really was no way to enforce this temporary law. When we look at Los Angeles and New York City, two cities where Navy servicemen were stationed during the war, tensions between servicemen and city natives rose quickly. Zoot suiters were seen as men who either dodged the draft or were not participating in war production back home. This is entirely make-believe. Most zoot suiters were fully employed in wartime production in the States, but simply wore their suits when they just weren't at work. However, when Navy servicemen saw them walking around Los Angeles and New York City, they were enraged. While they were restricted to wearing uniforms, zoot suiters were free to wear whatever they pleased, and they looked cool doing it. Servicemen believed that they were un-American and went as far as to call them dandies. So essentially, at this time, that is equivalent to calling someone gay.
Yeah.
Tensions reached a fever pitch in Los Angeles in August of 1942 with the Sleepy Lagoon murder case. So fighting broke out between Mexican-American zoot suiters and Navy servicemen, and ultimately 60 zoot suiters were arrested and charged. Men were beaten, shot, and stripped of the clothing they wore in an effort to emasculate them. It was entirely racially profiling, with Mexican and Black Americans being the primary target. The press only reinforced this racism, with the Los Angeles Times publishing articles like "Youth Gangs Leading Cause of Delinquency" and "Zoot Suiters Learn Lesson in Fight with Servicemen." I think especially at this time, the press calling the Navy men servicemen only reinforces the idea that zoot suiters were doing nothing to help wartime efforts, when in fact the servicemen were the aggressors. From 1942 to 1944, more riots occurred throughout the United States in areas such as Detroit, Harlem, and then also Canada. In Montreal, riots broke out between zoot suit youths of Italian and French descent and Canadian servicemen. Zoot suits were emblematic of leisure and conspicuous consumption during World War II, and due to the already rampant racism throughout the Western world, it was easy for the oftentimes white people in power to place these assumptions onto racialized people. The consumption of time and things carried subversive political significance during the early war years, a moment when Americans were called upon to forego luxury and to make sacrifices for the greater good. Servicemen were seen as heroes fighting against people who were not doing their part during the war. The crux of the issue is the idea of the leisure class being placed on the undeserving working class. Like the rich, who weren't demonized at the time, zoot suiters, and thus working class people of color, gave the impression that they could keep economic necessity, such as work, at arm's length. But the zoot suit was far from inexpensive, and the ensemble was frequently seen as a symbol of work ethic and pride. Many zoot suiters recalled toiling long hours and saving their money in order to purchase the latest styles and to enjoy a few hours of fun. Their place in the racial caste system of America did not allow people to simply go jobless. They were active members of the economy who were enjoying the benefits of some money carefully saved up. Not to mention, many young zoot suiters simply wore old, oversized suits purchased at second-hand stores.
I was gonna ask this.
Yes, yeah. But on them, they looked in fashion with the zoot suit. In part, many zoot suiters came of age during the 40s, but had endured childhood during the Great Depression, an era when people quite literally could not afford new clothing. The booming wartime economy meant relative financial stability, and rather than copying middle-class styles, working-class youths amplified pre-existing styles, creating something entirely new and stylish. Ultimately, because of the riots in LA, the zoot suit was primarily associated with Mexican Americans. In the decades leading up to the 40s, many Mexican families relocated to the US in an attempt to escape the Mexican Revolution. The younger generation really took hold of the zoot suit trend in LA. When the war started, Mexican Americans were for the first time quote-unquote seen as Americans, as they were drafted for war. However, the younger generations that stayed home were seen as rebellious and ultimately gangsters. As such, they were increasingly targeted in LA and tended to be the ones brutalized by servicemen and cops. With their flashy ensembles, which flew in the face of wartime rationing regulations and sober middle-class aesthetics, Mexican Americans of the early 40s appeared to reject white American patriotism and conventional, specifically heteronormative and bourgeoisie masculinities. Now, you may be asking yourself, did women participate in the zoot suit trend? Yes, specifically Mexican American women. Though much of the focus on zoot suits tend to be on men, women absolutely put on the ensemble, including the pants. Oftentimes, women wore black skirts, however, some incredible women also wore the trousers. They usually completed the ensemble with heavy mascara, lipstick, and a pompadour hairstyle with flowers and earrings.
Oh, yeah.
So it's such a good look. So in a moment when the epitome of womanhood was kind of like the Rosie the Riveter type, a figure who was mildly controversial because she was less feminine, but ultimately wasn't there to encourage women to have a career, rather to pitch in while the men were away. Women zoot suiters were seen as overly feminine. As opposed to the self-sacrificing mother, the woman zoot suiter was dangerously feminine and insubordinate. Their overuse of makeup and dangerously short skirts, or even pants, was seen as tacky and cheap, in other words, morally suspect and sexually available. Their appearance was monstrously feminine, and their behavior was condemned as masculine, bordering on cross-dressing behavior. Women who cross-dressed in public or who failed to wear at least 3 articles of clothing could be arrested for male impersonation during the 1940s.
Can I just say, cross-dressing behavior? Hilarious phrase. That's cross-dressing behavior.
I'm going to say it to myself now. Cross-dressing behavior. As such, many Mexican American women in LA were arrested at the time of the riots for this very reason. The women themselves were kind of just like wearing a trend. All of this is being put onto them from outside society, from white society primarily, just as like an aside. What's interesting is that there seemed to be a legal and illegal cross-dressing depending largely on occupation. Because of the war, most women worked in full men's attire. The job required them to wear shirts and trousers, sometimes coveralls and overalls, but because they wore these as uniforms at work, it was deemed appropriate. However, worn outside of this context, it was illegal, and oftentimes women of color were the target. The influence of zoot suit far surpassed the 1940s. In LA, the zoot suit riots empowered younger generations, and the style was seen as tied to political resistance. Malcolm X and Cesar Chavez, the American labor leader and civil rights activist, credited the zoot suit to a deep bond with community and shared resistance. The style in some ways aided in the work they both went on to do. The Chicano movement, a social and political movement in the US that worked to embrace Chicano identity and worldview that combated structural racism, encouraged cultural revitalization, and achieved community empowerment by rejecting assimilation, and kind of grew in the 60s. People in the Chicano movement continued wearing the zoot suit and used it as a way to bring people together. During the war and after the war, the zoot suit was tied to resistance against the government and corrupt policing. But we're also seeing the zoot suit now. It's really never gone away, kind of at all, without mentioning every single zoot suit reference in pop culture, because there are many. I'd like to bring up the 2025 Met Gala. So the theme of the event was Black tailoring / Black dandyism. As such, we saw so many beautiful moments and nods to zoot suits or complete references, namely Teyana Taylor wearing Ruth E. Carter. I think that is probably one of the most
direct.
The most direct, I would say.
I also love that I can appreciate the chain now. I think
yes.
I think when I first saw it, I was like, that's really costumey, and I didn't really get it. Mm-hmm. But now that I know the context, I'm like, okay.
Yeah. We also have Kabi Lame, Iman Hammam, and Dapper Dan. We also saw Maluma in Willy Chavaria, accompanied by the designer himself in his own zoot suit. He's an American designer who was previously the senior VP of design at Calvin Klein before starting his own brand. He frequently finds influence from zoot suits, which were seen in January 2025 when he made his debut at Paris Fashion Week with his fall-winter 2025 collection. But as far as the Met Gala goes, these were some of the kind of zoot suit looks of the night. What are y'all's thoughts on this zoot suit coming into 2025, 2026?
I love it. I love Willy. Mm-hmm. He's so good. I have been following since his debut. And it's just, his shows are just so good as well. They have because he pulls a lot from Catholicism and the theatricality of Catholicism, and it's just so fun.
And
I just think
it really complements the theatricality
of the shape. Yeah, so right.
Of the zoot suit.
100%.
Yeah, it really is nice altogether.
Because I think the at the core of the zoot suit is it being tied to music and dance, and so seeing that kind of movement be a part of it is really cool.
It's just I want one now. I gotta get into it.
Literally.
You'd look great in one.
But I was also, thank you. Mm-hmm. I was also thinking it's funny how you're saying that the younger kids would thrift larger, oversized things. Because I think that plays into a lot of baggy silhouettes in general being more accessible, because it doesn't have to fit you perfectly.
Yeah. And
so you can go into the menswear section of a thrift store and find a massive blazer, and that's all you need.
And that's the look that you're going for. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think especially when I feel so much fashion commentary is about whether or not something is tailored to fit you. The fact that you see trends that are not tailored, people out and about who are just wearing styles are not necessarily super concerned with tailoring.
I also think it's a fun, truly androgynous style, because even when a woman wears a fitted suit, it's still gonna feel feminized in some way, or at least that's how I feel. Obviously, I don't know. I get curves, So I think baggy styles, there's something so freeing about it, because you can completely change the shape of your form that truly 100%. Feels neither masculine nor feminine. It definitely it is purely its own thing.
That's why I love baggier silhouettes, just because I feel I can play with the form of my body in a way that other restrictive garments don't really allow you to do, because there's only so much. I mean, you're with tighter garments, you're just showing parts of your body. And so when you get kind of like amorphous blob like, you can really like tailor it to whatever shape you want to kind of give off. And that is very gender affirming. And I think potentially why so many like queer people and possibly trans people at the time really like were able to play with their clothing. And I think you see that obviously in the 20s with like the androgynous look. The fact that you got to like completely disappear your waist allowed people to like do whatever they wanted. And that was affirming for a lot of people.
Maggie, you'd look great in a suit.
Oh,
do you have a suit? You should get a suit.
I don't have a suit. Yeah. I do love like the Marlene Dietrich, like that 40s, like
I need that framed. I need that printed and framed in my house.
Good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, I used to wear like in my 40s. In case you didn't know, I used to just think it was the 40s when I was in college. I would wear like a trouser like that, not with a full jacket, but with like a polo shirt and a vest, and it was a fun time. I enjoyed that. It's really fun.
Oh my god, you should recreate the Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah.
Photo.
Get my brothers out here. We need to do a photo shoot.
Oh my god.
Yes, please.
Wait, you have disposable brothers.
That would be so good. You have men in your life.
There'll be like a 10-part vlog series finding everything I need for that.
I bet your brothers would be so down as well.
Okay. Maybe I'll see.
And you're holding Wemby.
Yes. Oh, that'd be so good.
I have to find a train station.
We can edit that in.
I'm a perfectionist to do it casually. Like I have to do it all.
Yeah, I just love the Zoot suit. I think it's like I love it. I feel like I mean I obviously just explained a lot of this, but I love its connection to like music and dance. And I think having a like an outfit that is so specific to an era of music really shows the like close connection that it had, and how like maybe the bagginess of it was also meant to be a part of the dance. It's like you become almost like larger than life when you're out dancing. And I think there's a lot to that with like swing and jazz and kind of that like underground music scene at the time in Harlem, is like being larger than life, being
and taking up space,
exactly. And I think that's another aspect of the Zoot suit, is taking up space. And I think its connection to political resistance too, it made me think a lot about like who is allowed to be politically resistant. And like, because the Zoot suit started as just like a trend that people were doing because that's, you know, it was associated with music. It was fashionable. And then it became seen as political resistance because that was like placed onto the people.
Because of who was wearing it. Yeah.
Exactly, because of who was wearing
because
it.
Because of the bodies that were wearing it.
Exactly. And so it's like who gets to choose whether or not they are politically resistant. But then that like, you know, later after the war, the like reclamation of the suit as a symbol of political resistance is like taking that back and being like, you know, we were persecuted for wearing this suit. We'll find, you know, power in that. It's just, it's interesting and cool and exciting seeing clothing having that much of an impact on like the world, pretty much.
I think this is what, whenever people say like fashion isn't political, I always think, I think you've just summed it up well, is because fashion is never just the clothes itself, it's the bodies that wear them.
Exactly.
And so you cannot separate politics from that.
Yeah.
We can put what's the text, Embodied Clothing? Who was the writer for that?
Oh
Joanna.
Oh my God.
We can stick that in the reading list.
That's an answer.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
That's a good one if anyone's interested in the concept of embodied clothing.
I think we all used that. in our
foundational text for real. Yeah,
that's the foundational text if you want to learn more.
I was just gonna say to your point of like your clothing, like it's the person who wears the clothing that like becomes political, and also like I mean the Zoot suit was political in so many ways because there were literally wartime regulations that like actual laws. Like literal laws, which I think were part practical because you did want to limit the amount of fabric. Yeah. And so there was a lot of like seriousness to that. The kind of general idea that I was kind of gathering from the articles that I read was like the 40s with like a booming wartime economy, you have people who like for years haven't really been able to afford clothing because of the Great Depression. And so to then put further restrictions on their ability to like access new clothing, people were like, F that, like I'm gonna wear whatever I want to wear, and I'm gonna purchase clothing because like also Zoot suits were so expensive, you're only buying like one, maybe two of them. So it's, you know, I think it's just such an interesting history. I love Zoot suits so much. I think they're so cool.
And what a great way to wrap it up. That was awesome. I genuinely learned so much.
Oh, thank you.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching the Bioscout podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like, comment, and subscribe. But genuinely comment. We read everyone.
Yeah, genuine comment.
Also, someone please compliment my tie.
I'll compliment it. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. It has a weird name for this kind of tying.
Ooh.
And I can't tell you what it is.
Hey, gatekeep.
It's because I don't remember. All right.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.